Be sure to pick up your copy of the MarsCon 2020 Dementia Track Fundraiser MP3 album with over 4 hours of live music and comedy recorded at MarsCon 2019 for just $20. Visit MarsConDementia.com and click on Shop.
I'm so happy the way that song came out, and I'm absolutely shocked that we put it together in a week and a half.
For more info on MarsCon, visit MarsCon.org. Thanks for listening, Funny Music fans, and
we will see you at MarsCon 2020. Peace.
Woo! Audience, leave.
I'm JP Tuesday.
And I'm Kiki Canon. We've been Disney fans our entire lives. And now, as childless adults, we're undertaking a journey through the media that shaped our lives.
Trying to find out if what made them special is still there.
We are Rewatching the Magic.
Hi, Kiki.
Hi, Tuesday.
Wow, what a run we've done so far. We've done pretty much every Disney Renaissance episode, every Disney Renaissance movie that there is, and this is the wrap-up. This is the big wrap-up, and also we'll be talking about the documentary Waking Sleeping Beauty. That'll be the main crux of this episode, but we're going to go a little freeform this time, talk a little bit more of what this era, how much this was part of our childhood, our formative years, as it were.
Yeah, because we mentioned before that we would have been between the ages of roughly 8 to 18 when the Disney Renaissance films were in their first run. So this is like our entire childhood, basically.
Yeah.
Like, I've got memories before age 8, but they start getting really fuzzy.
Yeah, so we're mostly going to be talking about the documentary Waking Sleeping Beauty, released in 2010. So this would be the 10th anniversary of this documentary. And for those of you who have not seen this documentary, it itself kind of wraps up 10 years between 1984 and 1994, where the Disney animated movies were not the best. They were still trying to go by the adage of what would Walt do, which really almost killed the company. And a lot of people are going to see that as heresy, even more of the hardcore fans today. Oh, if Disney was run the way Walt was running it, it'd be different, it'd be better, the parks would be better, the movies would be better, this, that, and the other. And we'll get to what that would have done with the company, because it is mentioned in the movie itself. It is on Disney Plus. If you have not seen this documentary and you are curious of the behind-the-scenes of Disney during that Disney Renaissance era, do check it out. It is very informative, very helpful, and very entertaining, because it was actually produced by one of the animators that was working at Disney at the time.
Yeah, just so you know, for if you haven't seen the movie, it is done entirely with archive footage, and most of the archive footage is Don Hand's home movies. Yeah, it's just him, and there's some in there that were filmed by John Lasseter as well, of Pixar, and a couple of other. I think he got some footage from some other animators who were there as well. But it's pretty much kind of the home movies of the people who were working at Disney at the time, intercut with a bunch of
news footage,
company footage, news footage, behind the scenes stuff. There's some stuff in the recording booths. You get to see like Jodie Benson going through part of your world for the first record. You get to see Jerry Orbach and Angela Lansbury working on Be Our Guest.
Because you go back to that episode, I was convinced those two were not even in the same studio. I was wrong.
Yeah, we were really, I noticed that too. We were really wrong on that, and some of those actors did actually appear, were present together for the record. So yeah, if you're interested in seeing what it really looked like on, in the studio, this is a pretty good one for you. I really enjoyed it, just as a blanket review. I thought it was a very well put together documentary, And I thought that even though there was a personal connection there, it was kind of a fair documentary as well.
Yeah.
You know, there were good times, there were really bad times. Nobody comes out completely looking like a villain or completely like a hero. It was just, these were a bunch of humans working under very stressful conditions, and they had good days and bad.
Yeah, and the documentary goes into really goes into Don Bluth's departure from Disney in the early '80s.
Yeah, and I'm sure we'll talk more about that when we start getting into movies that Don Bluth did. But
some of them are now owned by Disney.
Yeah, well, and he came back and worked with Disney as well, on other projects. But yeah, it starts. They start about the time that they're working on the Black Cauldron.
Yeah. So let's kind of turn the clock back to the point where this documentary kind of starts. Since it's around 1983.
Yeah.
And Ron Miller, who is the son-in-law of Walt Disney, he's taking over as CEO at this point. And he starts, from a backstage point of view, he's kind of running it more like a sports team rather than a company. Unfortunately, this kind of leads into what would almost become a corporate takeover of Disney by Schultz Steinberg in '84.
Yeah. The last people in the Disney family that were really in charge of anything day to day at the Disney company at this point, I think, were Ron Miller, who, like we said, was Walt's son-in-law, and then Walt's nephew, Roy E. Disney, who was the son of Roy O. Disney, Walt's brother, who co-founded Disney. So,
and apparently those two did not like each other.
Yeah, not so much. It's kind of a sad point in time because, like we said, there was a corporate takeover by a man named Saul Steinberg, who basically is the reason that Roy E. Disney, the last Disney-named person on staff, really decided to resign.
Yeah,
he was still involved. It's kind of weird that they used the word resigned. He took like a lesser position.
He was a high power executive in the company. He resigned from that position, but he was still on the board.
Yeah, and he still worked with the animation department. So This is not his departure from the story of the Renaissance by any means. No. He was a major player throughout the Renaissance, but he was no longer the
day-to-day guy.
Yeah, he was not the big cheese over the entire company, but he came he resigned, and then Saul Steinberg got rid of Miller, Walt's son-in-law.
Yeah.
So it was pretty much the ousting of the rest of the Disney family. It was very much kind of a hostile takeover. And
go ahead.
And eventually Roy comes back. He is the vice chairman on the board, and then he gets named as chairman of the animation department. So not necessarily the day-to-day on-the-ground guy, but kind of a guiding hand from the board.
And this is not a bad time. Corporate-wise, it's kind of a shaky bad time, but for the television aspect, it's actually a pretty good time because it is around this time that is the launch of the Disney Channel, which really starts getting Disney's name out there. The films were kind of iffy, but the television was really good. The Disney Channel launched in 1983 as a premium subscription cable channel, on the level of an HBO or a Showtime back in the day. Meaning you had to get a special, you had to call your cable service, say, I want the Disney Channel, and then you pay that extra premium for the Disney Channel. I know my parents did that.
Yeah. Where I lived, and still live now, but where I was living, not for my early childhood, it was kind of even worse because it was even in a even smaller town and even farther out in the country. But the town I live now, we still do not have the greatest of cable services. Right now, my cable company does not carry Comedy Central. Like that's
a lot
how
of
awful
a lot of cable companies have dropped the Viacom channel, so it's an issue with Viacom.
But I did not have access to the Disney Channel until my late teens. So it would have basically been like the end of the Renaissance when I finally got access to the Disney Channel for the first time.
And at that point, the Disney Channel had gone from a premium service to just basic service. So
regular cable package.
Yeah.
And that's how I got it eventually. Eventually it ended up kind of on our cable system. But in my area, only the rich families had Disney Channel for a while.
And with the start of the Disney Channel, it was not just, the old stuff. Because they knew even with Disney Plus now, your old content can only take you for so long before people want something new. And they did create brand new shows for that first few years of the Disney Channel. I remember shows like Welcome to Pooh Corner. I remember Mousercise. I remember Dumbo's Circus.
Oh my God, Mousercise. I hadn't thought of that in ages. That was, man, you just shoved me far back in, because we didn't have Disney Channel, but somebody, I believe, gave me a Mousercise VHS tape. Mm-hmm. It was a couple of episodes of Mousercise, or maybe they showed it in one of my schools or something for PE. I can't remember, but I had Mousercise on VHS, even though I didn't have the Disney Channel. For those of you who don't remember, Mousercise was a workout program for kids.
Yeah, and it would be kids doing exercise stuff to Disney songs, and it was a nice little cute show. Looking at myself, I should have done more Mousercising.
Yeah, same probably. But so Disney Channel is doing very well. Despite being a premium service, it did kind of debut to pretty good numbers. However, the parks are losing a little bit of money at this time.
Yeah.
They
opened Epcot around this time, and it didn't do well the first year.
Yeah, it took Epcot a little bit to take off.
And they also opened up Tokyo Disneyland, and that took
That took even longer to take off, I think.
Just wait till we get to Euro Disney.
Yeah, that's going to be a fun episode. But yeah, so they're trying to expand the parks internationally now. They're trying to expand the Florida park, especially. They're losing some money on that end. Their live action movies are doing quite well. Disney had picked up a couple of Oscars by this point in recent years. They were getting better known for live action stuff. The TV end is going pretty well. They're doing TV animation for regular broadcast channels. They're also doing things like Disney Sunday Night Movie and, other things on regular, I don't know if it was ABC then, but they had a deal with some network.
I think it was NBC.
Yeah. But they had a deal with a network channel, and then, of course, they had the Disney Channel. So their live action and television stuff was going pretty well, but the parks and the animation, the magical aspect of Disney, was becoming a joke. Kids our age weren't really into that. I don't think at this time.
As the documentary said, kids wouldn't be caught dead watching a Disney movie.
Yeah,
that was the phrase that they were using in the documentary.
And you also have to remember is that the infamous clamshell Disney VHS tapes were also not a thing yet at this point. Oh. Disney was very protective, as they would remain, but even more so protective of the classic films. They generally released them once every 7 years or so to a limited run in a theater. That's when you took your kids, that had been born in the last 7 years to go see Bambi or Pinocchio or Sleeping Beauty or whatever. And then they would go away again. And that was the only way you could see them, although sometimes you could see them on TV. Yeah. But that was
especially with the Disney Channel
event. Well, the Disney Channel brought them onto TV, but it would take a few extra years for the idea of VHS to really be, because Disney didn't want you watching their movies when you wanted to. They wanted you to watch them on their schedule. So VHS was kind of a hard sell to Disney at the first part.
So yeah, the first VHS would not be released until '85, and that would be Pinocchio.
Pinocchio.
And that did, for as the phrase can go, it did gangbusters.
Yeah, that was an immediate hit, and one of the reasons that eventually sold, quite literally, the Disney company on VHS as a thing was they realized, like, we don't have to pay any money to make these films because we already make them and we own them, and so there's no licensing or anything. So it was basically just free money for them. Yeah. They put out a little bit of the cost to make the tapes. They immediately recouped that and more in profit from sales. When these movies, I remember when some of these original, not Pinocchio necessarily, because we would have been like 4 or something, but I remember some of the later ones, like when they finally put out Sleeping Beauty and stuff. It was huge. It was like the biggest news story to a little kid that there was a new VHS coming out of a classic Disney film. And there would be commercials like first time ever on home video. The great
Get it now before it goes back into Disney Vault.
Yeah, the Disney Vault idea for the VHS came a little bit later. Once they initially got the cash grab, they instituted the Disney Vault a little later. But the Disney Vault was definitely a big thing during our childhoods. After that first few years when they just kept releasing things and, get your little hands on it now, kids, then after that they started this idea of the Disney Vault.
Yeah.
But
and when they found out that the VHSs were not really impacting the theater revenue, they went all in on that.
Yeah.
Because people were still seeing it in theaters even though they had it on VHS.
Yeah,
not so much now because home media is such a dominant thing, but back then, when it was still new, yeah.
Well, here's the thing that I think, especially if you're younger than us and listening to this, people don't quite remember just how awful televisions and VHS players were for quality. You could see the movie, but it wasn't pristine. The sound wasn't great. The screen was extraordinarily tiny compared to today. Mm-hmm. Today you can, I do not have the greatest equipment, and movies on my home TV are better clarity and better sound than going to my local theater, which is awful. So yeah, it was an event to go to a movie. And it was the best, clearest picture you were ever going to see, the most wonderful sound you were ever going to hear. Everyone, not everyone, because there were always, horrible people, but more people than now were respectful, stayed quiet. People now just act like they're in their living rooms. It's a nightmare. I kind of hate going to the movies now.
Yeah.
It's just, if you go to a movie theater, you are not in your living room. Please do not talk through the movie. Please do not sit and look at your phone during the movie, because I don't care how low down you turn the brightness on your phone, it's still going to bug me, okay? So, don't do that. It's awful, and I hate it. You're in public. Act like it. Anyway, so yeah, at the time, that did not impact their theater sales at all. So the VHS market became really big. But as far as new things, that's what we're talking about. New Disney animation, feature animation. It was not really going well.
Let's go. Let's take a look at that one the one that came out the year we were born, The Fox and the Hound.
Yeah, which is, I mean, I'll be honest, I've never seen The Fox and the Hound. I've seen clips, but I don't remember. If I watched it as a child, which is possible, I have no memory of it.
I haven't seen that movie in a while. I remember liking the first half of it when they're small and cute little animals, but not so much liking them when they're the adult animals. But that could have just been kid me liking the kiddie stuff more.
Yeah, and honestly, I mean, that Fox and the Hound is not a movie that holds any personal resonance for me. It's not part of my life or my childhood. If it's part of yours, that's fine and wonderful and great for you, but that was not my experience. And I don't think that was a lot of kids' experience, because I think whenever I heard other kids talk about these movies that were coming out, Fox and the Hound, Black Cauldron, even that they're working on at the start of this documentary, some of what were the other ones that came out? Oliver and Company, that came out just before the Renaissance and stuff. I remember kids kind of mentioning them in passing, like, oh, we were bored this weekend, so our parents took us to see Oliver and Company. But, like, nobody was running around the play yard at my school singing the songs from Oliver and Company. Nobody was talking about how Black Cauldron was the best movie they'd ever seen and you have to go see it immediately. Nobody talked about Fox and the Hound changing their life, or blowing their little kid mind, in the theater.
Well, we did hear a lot of, I don't know about you, but I heard a lot of kids getting freaked out over Return to Oz.
Oh, yeah, that movie was terrifying and still is terrifying, and I don't know what any of them were thinking.
So we need to cover that movie eventually.
Oh, yeah, no, I love that movie, absolutely. It's one of my favorite things, but I don't know who thought that was a movie that was okay to show to a kid, because, oh my god, that was like nightmare fuel for most of my childhood. And it was one of those things that was like you saw it once and then you didn't quite remember what it was or if it was real. So you just had these vague memories of seeing like the wheelies or whatever, and like severed heads talking to Dorothy and like the world's creepiest jack-o'-lantern or whatever. And you were not quite sure this was real. Like, you would kind of, and not everybody had seen it because it was not a huge hit, so you'd tell other kids about it, and they'd be like, that sounds like you made it up. That sounds like a nightmare. You're telling me about a nightmare. That's not a real movie. Nobody would show that to a child. So yeah.
Let's kind of get back here. Let's kind of step back a bit here, because go back to '84. And Miller is outed as the CEO, and Roy Disney brings in Michael Eisner, a name that is synonymous with this era of Disney. And I forgot about this before I saw the documentary, but it was actually Frank Wells' idea to bring in Michael Eisner.
Yeah.
And Frank Wells was a friend of Roy Disney from school.
Honestly, if this documentary and this era kind of has a hero at the corporate end of it, I think Frank Wells would be it.
Yeah.
Nobody at any point during this documentary has the slightest negative thing to say about Frank Wells. Nobody says an unkind word. Nobody talks about him like yelling at staff or coming in crabby, and I'm sure he did, but it's not how people remember him who worked for him.
Mm-hmm. So what we know is Roy Disney, he brings in Michael Eisner, who was working at Paramount at the time, or ABC, and they bring in Frank Wells to become the president of the company. And that starts, as the documentary says, this is the first time outside people were brought into Disney at that high a level.
Yeah, because this had very much been a family affair up until this point.
And yes, there's been a few past CEOs, even before Ron Miller, that were not directly related to Disney, but those were people that kind of were Disney's apprentices. So they were kind of brought up in Disney's philosophy.
Yeah, this was the first time that somebody else who had been running something not Disney had come up. They had kind of promoted from within, or trained their own people, or stuck with family and close friends, but Eisner was absolutely an outsider, yeah.
And of course get Frank Wells, and then when all of that comes together, Eisner brings in Jeffrey Katzenberg to run the animation. And even Katzenberg didn't even know he was running the animation until he was told in his first day of job.
Yeah, and Katzenberg had no experience in animation before this. He was a live-action film guy.
Yeah.
He had no interest in running animation at all.
But that was the job he was given.
Yeah, but they say that in the documentary, they kind of say that he and Eisner were like school buddies or something, or
something like that.
Yeah, something. They had worked together. Oh no, he had worked at Paramount. That's what it was. He had worked at Paramount underneath Eisner, so Eisner brought Katzenberg over, but. I kind of wonder, because of the way their relationship develops, if Eisner was not attempting to set Katzenberg up for failure. I don't know. I don't know either of these people. I don't know anybody who knows them, but, it does kind of seem like, you're bringing a guy in, and then you're like, come work for me at Disney. And then you just walk him up to the animation building and go, well, that's your problem now. Have fun with it and leave. Which is exactly how they describe Eisner telling him he was running the animation department.
And again, like we said, at that point, Walt Disney's feature animation was kind of seen as a joke by most people. So
yeah,
I guess
nobody in the industry even respected it anymore. Pretty much everybody they talked to was like, yeah, we grew up. We wanted to be animators because of Walt Disney, but nobody wanted to, like, work at Disney at this point. Mm-hmm. It was seen as very old school. In fact, what did they call the men that were working there? It was like...
The 9 old men.
Yeah, the 9 old men were kind of in charge internally. They were the senior animators when this whole thing starts. And they were very much doing things in the way they thought Walt would have done them in the 40s. Yeah. And I'm gonna, for those of you who are bristling at the, like, no, you should do things the way Walt did them. Walt was a very progressive guy in the sense that he was always looking for the new thing. Mm-hmm. And one of the reasons why he stopped caring so much about feature animation was because, like, television had come along, and then animatronics and stuff had come along, and he got really into the theme park and the animatronic and the live experience. So he was always looking for the new way to do things. So when you talk about that's not the way Walt would have done it, I'm not sure you can really say that in anything other than the most broad philosophy, because I think the answer to what would Walt do is he would be looking for the next big thing. And it seemed that the people in charge of the animation had stopped looking for the next big thing and instead were looking for the old thing.
Yeah, I mean, they were still doing it the old way, which, can you imagine, I mean, this is a sidetrack, can you imagine if you had shown Walt Disney what Pixar was doing at this point?
Oh, man. Walt would have dropped everything and shoved everything into Pixar at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, that would have captivated. He was so in love with technology.
Or at least
the second there was a new technology, he wanted to know everything about it.
That was one of the reasons why they ended up doing Rescuers Down Under, because they had Pixar's cap system, and they wanted to do a movie with this new technology, and Walt would have totally dug in on that.
Yeah, I firmly believe that's where, everything I've ever read about Disney or seen about Disney tells me that Walt would have absolutely jumped on that. But the problem is that you had, and I don't want to lay all the blame at their feet by any point, they are legends, but the 9 old men, they had all these new animators coming in, people who had grown up idolizing them and Walt. And they were not nobody. I'm talking about, everybody in the chain of command. Nobody seemed to want to hear the new ideas, which is what led a upstart animator called Don Bluth, who was working for Disney at the time, to just up and leave one day and take
half the animation team.
Half the animation team, and was like, I'm gonna start my own studio with blackjack and other things. So
I'm gonna go make Secret and Nib now. Bye.
Yeah, that was exactly what he did, and I think that was the reason why. A lot of them talked about how they felt stifled at this time, that it was so old school and so unwilling to change and move with the times. And
who you had John Lasseter, you had Don Bluth, you had Tim Burton on your team.
Yeah, we talked about that in the
Nightmare,
which was during this period that we're talking about. They even talk about it a little bit in passing in the documentary. But I mean, how badly do you have to be running your studio to lose eager young talent like Don Bluth and Tim Burton, who really didn't have anywhere else to go? It's not like they were big names. They were Don and Tim that worked for the animation.
Yeah, it did work out for them in the end, but imagine that what they could have been if they had people listening to them.
Yeah. But that they wanted to do things other than this is what Disney is known for.
Yeah.
Ironically, one of the ways, and this is jumping a little ahead a bit, but one of the ways that they brought Disney back was kind of by doing the one thing these animators were neglecting from Disney's past, which was bringing back the fairy tale idea. Because they had also gone away from the fairy tale idea. Fox and the Hound, Oliver and Company, and even something like Black Cauldron, which is more, medieval and mystical and magical, it's still not a fairy tale.
Yeah.
It's not in that kind of classic canon of fairy tales. So I think it's ironic that even though they needed to move forward, they kind of did so by looking backward a little bit as well.
And let's kind of go back, because we have gotten ahead of ourselves. So with Eisner, Wells, and Katzenberg in Disney now, it's automatically butting heads with the animation team. Especially since, again, we've mentioned this is during the production of The Black Cauldron. Katzenberg looks at the dailies of Black Cauldron, saying it's too scary, it's too violent, it's not what he would consider to be Disney. Which, he's right. It wasn't. it wasn't. Black Cauldron was meant to be scary. They wanted to go a little bit more adult with the movie because, again, kids were thinking Disney wasn't cool. So they thought, okay, let's try to make it cool with this popular story, The Black Cauldron, and let's really make it scary. Let's make it a little bit more. It was the first PG-13 Disney animated movie, and Katzenberg, we have to edit this stuff out, and that was the you can't edit an animated movie. Once it's drawn, once it's animated, that's the movie.
Yeah,
can't change it. And Katzenberg says you can edit any film, and he edited this film. Wasn't clean. If you actually watch this movie, there's not a lot of clean cuts in terms of some of the editing. And so he did edit this movie.
Yeah.
And he put this movie out, and it didn't do well at the box office because a lot of people saw this is not what people expect when they see Disney. No fault of anyone, but it was an experiment. They wanted to try to go to an older audience, and it didn't work. And considering that their competition was the Care Bears movie,
which
embarrassing.
beat them. Badly. Yeah.
That's embarrassing. When you try to go for the older audience and the movie for the babies win, the baby movie beat out your movie.
Yeah.
That's like releasing, for lack of a better term, the Avengers, and the number one movie in the world is Barney.
Yeah. That I cannot imagine what it must have been like to be working on that staff when that opening weekend hits. And you just realize that, that had to be like the lowest point.
That's the gut punch right there.
Yeah. So, I feel bad for them. But the thing is that Katzenberg was onto something. And I think it was because he came from that live action background where he did not think of animation in a precious sense.
A film is a film.
Yeah, a film is a film, and if it's got to be edited, it's got to be edited. And
this is where we get
editing animation is incredibly tricky. I'm not going to say it's not. And Katzenberg is probably not the best editor for it to have had, but yeah, he was right. You absolutely can edit an animated film. Of course you can. Why couldn't you? Is there film? Can you shove it in a machine and edit it? Yes, you can.
And this is where we get the phrase "Waking Sleeping Beauty," in that the phrase pretty much meaning you need to get the Disney magic back into these movies, which it had lost.
Yeah, a phrase that came from Katzenberg himself.
Yes.
And a phrase that they absolutely hated him for. The animators absolutely hated Katzenberg at the start.
Yeah.
It's very obvious that all of these people just loathed this
Hollywood kid is coming into our turf and telling us how to do our job.
Yeah, this live action kid too.
Yeah.
He's never worked on an animated film before. He doesn't respect the craft. Because Katzenberg very much was a money man. Mm-hmm. He talks in there about he doesn't want to win the Academy Award. He wants to win the Bank of America Award. He wants the dollar bills, y'all. But the animators are artists, and they want to make the best movie without necessarily having to think about the most commercially viable movie. Yeah. I can understand both of those opinions, I get why you need to be able to recoup, if you're a corporation, but I also understand that these are people who worked hard on their craft and they wanted to make good art. Fortunately, we have been shown now that there is, a middle ground you can strike that makes both people happy, but at the time, nobody really saw it that way. It was going to be...
wanted to see it.
Yeah, it was going to be Katzenberg's way, or it was going to be the animator's way, But of course, Katzenberg's the one in charge, so he wins out in the end.
To go on a sidetrack here, at this point as well, with the Black Cauldron being in the box office, Disney starts producing animation for television full time. They've done some stuff before, but this was the first time they've produced television shows that are fully animated, and we got the Wuzzles and the Gummy Bears at the same time on Saturday mornings. And that was the first attempt by Disney to do television animation. This was under Eisner. This was Eisner's idea to go into television.
Like we said, television was going better for them, but Disney had not really before in any major way, I don't think, really done the television animation. That was very much a Hanna-Barbera thing.
Deke Deke, Hanna-Barbera. I'm forgetting one of them. It's
I'm blanking too. But anyway,
Filmation. That's
Filmation. Yes, there were these other kind of smaller-ish studios that they handled the TV side of it. Disney was the film animation company. So Eisner was like, well, if they can do it, we can do it too.
And a lot of it was the apprehension of trying to keep the same level of Disney quality in a television show. And looking at what was around at the time with, Hanna-Barbera and Filmation and Deke, the quality wasn't the best. It worked, and the stories were good, but the animation was not the best.
Yeah.
But with Disney doing it, they found a way to make the stories good and the animation good.
Yeah.
And it worked for them.
And again, before too long, we may talk about that more in depth.
And this is also the time where Pinocchio is released on VHS and goes gangbusters.
Yeah.
And then we get, at the same time, we're getting the heads cracking at the animation studio again over The Great Mouse Detective, or at the time was called Basil of Baker Street, which was the name of the book series, Basil of Baker Street.
Okay, I'm going to admit I did not know until literally you just said that was based on a book series.
Really?
I did not know that. That's awesome. I'm sorry.
You just thought they decided, let's make Sherlock Holmes a mouse?
Disney has done weirder things. I'm just going to put that out there.
So that caused some butting heads because, okay, here's this movie called Basil of Baker Street. That's not a marketable name, they said. Let's call it The Great Mouse Detective. And there's this big memo that goes around the animation studio of let's rename all the movies to a description. 7 Little Men Help a Girl. The Girl with the see-through shoes. Puppet Becomes Real.
Yeah, here's the thing, is there are two great kind of Hollywood memo stories that you hear about from roughly this period of time in Hollywood. This is one of them. The animators kind of rebelling against not Katzenberg, but Schneider, who is under Jeffrey Katzenberg in the hierarchy. Katzenberg, Roy Disney also brought him in, but he's kind of Katzenberg's second in command, I guess.
Kind of, yeah.
Sort of in the hierarchy, if I understand things correctly.
The movie calls him Katzenberg's Katzenberg.
Yeah, Katzenberg's Katzenberg. But so Schneider sends out this email saying we have decided to change the name, and the animators fake a memo from Schneider with all these funny names renaming Disney classics. The other great one you hear is from the making of Back to the Future, when one of the studio heads sends a memo that says, I think Back to the Future sounds stupid. We should call it Invaders from Mars or whatever the name of the book is in the movie.
Invaders from Space.
Invaders from Space. Yes, they wanted to name it after the book that Marty McFly's father is working on in the movie. And Spielberg got around this by writing a letter back to the executive and said, "We want to thank you for the hilarious memo you sent. We all love practical jokes like that. It really raised spirits on set. Thank you if you ever want to send any more." So he basically sort of mocked the guy, pretending not to understand that this was a legitimate studio note. So those are the two great ones from the 80s that I think are just like the best kind of moves of an underling to an overling, as it were. But yeah, so that, Schneider did not take that well.
No, he blew a gasket, but in blowing a gasket, he gained their respect.
I don't know how that happened. The documentary is it was just kind of like, he completely yelled at us and threatened our families, and for some reason we were okay with him afterwards. I don't know. I think there's a bit in there that's not...
Yeah, my interpretation is that they thought he didn't have passion for the job, and when he showed that he did have passion for the job, hey, I just want to make sure we have the best movie we can. Okay, we understand where you're coming from now. You do have passion. It's not the same passion we have, but we see that you have passion for this thing.
Yeah, that very well could be it. I thought that was a very strange part of the thing, because it just kind of made it sound like he came in and yelled at all and insulted us, and afterwards we were like, this guy's kind of okay. I don't know. But anyway, so let's fast forward a little bit. The thing that really gets Disney Animation a boost is that the new kid in animation, who I just mentioned, who happens to be Steven Spielberg, has recently signed on to a crazy idea of a film called Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Yep.
And this movie was attempting to get all of the major animation players to come together and, participate in the animation, but also license their characters and other stuff.
And it was a who's who. You had, Mickey Mouse and Bugs Bunny, Daffy and Donald Duck. You had Betty Boop is in this movie. You had blink and you'll miss it. You'll see Popeye and Woody Woodpecker.
Yeah, and I mean, they really did call all the major players of animation from the dawn of film.
Yeah.
And brought them in on this. I really think that it was basically on the backs of Zemeckis, Frank Marshall, and Steven Spielberg.
Yeah, and the whole movie is a love letter to the golden age of animation in the 40s.
Yeah, and the thing is that Spielberg absolutely admits that Disney was one of the biggest influences on his life. Just Disney company, Disney media, Walt Disney. His favorite song is "When You Wish Upon a Star" because that was his biggest. Pinocchio was huge in his childhood. But at the same time, he got into animation and almost immediately started beating Disney at their own game.
Because he was working with Don Bluth.
And they put out a little movie you may have heard of called An American Tail. So that movie absolutely stomped Disney.
Yeah, Great Mouse Detective did well, but American Tail was the number one movie that year.
Yeah, it's weird to have two movies about mice come out in the same year. One is by Disney, and Disney loses the Battle of the Mouse. There's some deep irony there. But the interesting thing to me is that it is Spielberg who I think revitalizes the idea of Disney back a little bit in the public opinion. Because this was, it's Mickey Mouse on screen with Bugs Bunny. How do you not want to see that?
Mm-hmm.
Especially at the time. You would never, that was unheard of, these corporations working together. No.
Especially when, at this point, you have Mickey Mouse, who is the good, sweet, innocent boy, hanging out with that bad boy, that naughty, naughty Bugs Bunny.
Yeah. This was bigger than Spider-Man showing up in Captain America Civil War.
Yeah.
I'm not kidding. Like, this was the crossover to end all crossovers. And it brought back the idea of feature animation and Disney as a player in feature animation back just a little bit more into the public consciousness. And I think gave them like a little foot up. Because, like I said, they had hit rock bottom.
And at this point, and it's also another gut punch to them, but the Disney Animation team was not involved with the movie.
Yeah, they had kind of there were a couple of Disney animators who kind of jumped ship for a bit and went to go work on it. Yeah, but Disney as a studio was not housing this in their animation studio and stuff.
Because they were working on Oliver and Company.
Yeah, because they were working on Oliver and Company, which, it was a success. It did beat Land Before Time, which it opened against. Mm-hmm. But I'll tell you, if you mention Oliver and Company and you mention Land Before Time, there's only one of those movies I can sing songs from, and it ain't Oliver and Company.
And Oliver and Company was the movie that got us Ashman and Menken.
Yeah,
because they worked on
that's great, and I'm giving it its due. But I'm saying that I'm not sure time has been as kind to this as the initial box office was.
We never got Oliver and Company 2 through 15.
Yeah. Land Before Time was a franchise that just wouldn't quit there for a while. But I have such fond, deep, emotional memories of Land Before Time, and I've got nothing for Oliver and Company. It was like, oh, Billy Joel was in that. Huh. You put a pop star in a animated movie. That's weird. Maybe you should never do that again. Boy, was I wrong.
But Who Framed Roger Rabbit did amazingly well. And did well for the Disney company. It was released under Disney, under their Touchstone label.
Yeah, and it cost Disney a lot of money. And in fact, a lot of people thought that, a lot of people in the industry thought that the Disney company was making a mistake going in on this. It wasn't done through their animation team, so why are you even bothering? It might sully the idea of some of your characters, Mickey and Donald and some of the other Disney characters that are in there. And they put a lot of money into it. They stood to lose quite a substantial amount. And this thing was the unexpected smash hit of the decade, probably at that point. Nice. Just like so huge. And so they recouped all that money back and more, but it was not at all a sure thing. We think of it now as like, wow, that was a groundbreaking film. Of course that was always going to do well, but that was not the way they saw it at the time. That was a huge gamble, and it just happened to work out for Disney.
And then that kind of gets to turn, because now we get to 89, and they start working. And also with Oliver, we have to. I got to step back here. Oliver and Company, it's Roy Disney that makes the announcement that there's going to be a new Disney movie every year, starting with Oliver and Company.
Yeah, which takes Katzenberg by surprise.
Yeah.
Yeah, Katzenberg kind of admits that he was not part of that decision. Roy just kind of one day announced to, I guess, the press or something somewhere, that Roy was just like, and there's going to be a new Disney movie every year. You're going to have Disney in theaters every year. And Katzenberg was like, well, crap, I guess we got to do that now. We weren't preparing for that.
So now you have, and this kind of starts what a lot of people hated Katzenberg before, was he was really pushing his team to get that that move the next movie out by the next year.
But it does open the door for one of the greatest things Disney ever did, which they kind of called the Gong Show.
Yeah.
And if you worked at Disney in any position in the documentary, they're like, even the janitor could walk in. You got to pitch an animated movie. Like, you could walk into and say, you know, okay, there's a dog and a cat, and they're gonna go meet a unicorn somewhere. And if your pitch was good, Katzenberg would go, yeah, that sounds fine. Start working on that now, because he had to fill a 1 movie a year quota. Suddenly.
Okay, so it's Shakespeare, but it's lions. Good, go with it.
Yeah, it's more, you know, let's go back to fairy tales. You know, Walt was working on Beauty and the Beast before he died. Okay, fine, let's go back to that. There's also this Little Mermaid thing. I mean, we just did Splash. People seem to like mermaids. Yeah, fine, I don't care. Go with it.
Well, have this idea of an animated movie based off the Legend of Pocahontas. Yeah, go with that.
Yeah, sure. Pocahontas. Yeah, fine. Whatever. They were taking pretty much all comers at this point. Like, if it was even a half-baked idea, they would at least let you kind of, it seems, go into early production at the very least.
So I get the idea from Mickey Mouse, Fist in the Popper. Yeah, go. You know, blah blah blah, going on and on and on. Mickey Mouse movie, Goofy movie, DuckTales movie. Let's do it. Let's do it. Let's do it.
And as you may have heard, we got the start of the Disney Renaissance in there.
Yeah, which started with
we get The Little Mermaid, and that's the first one in the slot. You know, that okay, let's start working on that. And David Geffen says to his buddy Katzenberg, "Hey, remember those dudes that worked on Oliver and Company? You really need to hire them again." And then we get, you know, Ashman and Menken.
And the documentary shows us some great footage of Menken's pitch for Under the Sea, and we actually hear
Ashman. Yeah, that was Howard Ashman. Yeah. This has, if you are a Howard Ashman fan, this has an amazing amount of documentary footage of Howard Ashman. Run to your computer as soon as you finish this episode and turn on Waking Sleeping Beauty, because you get to see so much of Howard Ashman, and it was so good to see him on screen. Some of that footage I had not seen before.
And he, you know, you actually hear a bit of the demo version of Under the Sea and him describing it, and the whole scene, and him just pantomiming the drumming and all that. You can tell how much passion he had in that project.
Yeah, and here's the other thing. I said this movie doesn't really have any, you know, straight up heroes or villains, but there is a thread that goes through this film, and honestly, it has stuck with the Disney Company and still sticks with the Disney Company from the moment that Walt died, which is, who's going to be the new Walt Disney?
Yeah.
Who's the real successor to the spirit of Walt Disney?
Who's the face of the company?
Well, that too. But here's the thing, though, is that when they keep asking what would Walt do, you know, throughout this, and looking back at Walt as a visionary and a leader, I think we had our answer. And I don't think he survived long enough to really take that title. But if you look at the day-to-day, what Howard Ashman contributed to the rise of the Disney Renaissance, that man was a genius. And I would absolutely fight you that I think he was the successor to Walt Disney, and he just didn't get to stay with us long enough to prove it. Because they talk about little things, you know, like they said, hey, we've decided to have a crab in the movie, and he's going to watch over the Little Mermaid and help her out, and maybe he conducts an orchestra and he works for the king. And Howard Ashman immediately goes, and he's Jamaican. And they're like, what? That doesn't make any, that's completely opposite. He's like, nope, he has to be Jamaican. That character is 100% Jamaican. And they're they just kind of went with it. And of course, you can't imagine Sebastian any other way.
Can you imagine Sebastian with like a British accent?
Yeah. Howard Ashman invented the I Want song in the context of Disney.
Yeah.
You see footage of him talking about the evolution of the I Want song. And he's correct in the fact that it is an old Broadway tradition. You know, it's typically the leading lady will sit down and sing about what she wants, and he brings up, you know, what are the ones he mentions in there? He mentions My Fair Lady. He mentions a few other ones. I'm blanking. I'm sorry. We're recording this quite late at night,
Yeah.
but he mentions all these famous Broadway plays and how there's this moment where you fall in love with the heroine because she sits down and she tells you what you want, and you spend the rest of the show rooting for her to get that thing. And he brought that idea into Disney, and it is now so linked with Disney that people forgot it came from Broadway.
Yep.
People call the Broadway songs now like, well, this is our version of the Disney I Want song. Not even realizing that it was a thing Ashman brought over from his Broadway background. But he invented that entire central point that we now cannot think of a Disney movie without. He brought the entire concept of Aladdin as a film.
That was his passion project. That was his baby.
And like we said, at that point in time, they were greenlighting almost anything to meet the quota. But, you know, it's one of the best, you know, probably the three greatest movies, in everybody's opinion, of the Disney Renaissance were Howard Ashman's babies.
Yeah.
You know, they are Little Mermaid, which he immediately took to and started composing for. And then Beauty and the Beast, which wasn't even supposed to be a musical and was failing until they brought in Ashman and Menken and said, make this a musical. And then everything clicked. And then he came up with the entire concept of Aladdin and wrote, you know, about half of the songs.
Yeah.
And if there is an absolute hero of the Disney Renaissance, I am claiming that it's Howard Ashman.
I would argue with you. I would not argue on that. He definitely is, if not the hero, he's sort of the fairy godmother, if you want to go in that direction.
Yeah, he was probably the magic.
Yeah.
He was the one that showed back up and brought magic to the world. I firmly believe it. In that it was his absolute childish delight, and not childish in a bad way, like childlike, you know, wonder-filled delight, that he really believed in the Disney animated dream. He believed in Snow White and Sleeping Beauty and Pinocchio and Peter Pan. You know, these were the founding films of his personal childhood that meant so much to him. And by all accounts, getting any job at Disney was like his dream come true. And he immediately, when they said, hey, we want you to come work for Disney, he basically said, like, if it's animation, please, God, put me in the animation department. So yeah, I mean, he was a man who absolutely knew where he needed to be in this structure and what he needed to give to it. So.
And so, yeah, and it is also around this time that a certain partnership forms. A partnership with Disney that still exists to this day, a little computer programming company called Pixar.
Yeah, and this has pretty much always been John Lasseter's baby, has it not?
Yeah, because Disney wanted John Lasseter back.
Yeah.
Because they were seeing what Lasseter was doing with Pixar. At the time, Pixar was doing TV commercials, seeing what they could do with computer animation there, and they wanted Lasseter to come back to Disney Lasseter said no because he was going to stick with Pixar because they were a startup animation company at the time. They were a computer company first. They made the commercials to sell their computers, not to make cartoons. And they were getting successful off of these shorts and these commercials that, okay, now we're an animation company.
Yeah, I'm gonna say that when they brought up that Pixar was doing the commercials.
System? Yeah, oh yeah.
No, when the commercial they show
The Listerine commercial.
is the Listerine commercial, which I had totally forgotten that Pixar had done. But that commercial was everywhere. It was, I don't know, it was so fascinating. But yeah, I mean, we'll probably go into Pixar in more depth later when we get to things like Toy Story, but I need everybody to understand that Pixar was the computer effects people.
Yeah.
I mean,
you know those M&M commercials you guys see on TV? They created it.
Yeah, and also, I mean, they sort of started working feature-wise with Lucasfilm.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, Lucasfilm, who was, you know, at the time, the #1 effects studio in Hollywood. And Lucas wanted to branch out into special effects and computer special effects especially, and brought them in to work with Industrial Light and Magic, ILM. And so they end up working on Wrath of Khan, the Genesis moment when the Genesis bomb or whatever explodes on the planet and terraforms the entire planet in seconds. That was them. That was one of their early things that they worked on. They created the first completely CGI character in film history, which was for young Sherlock Holmes. There's a fight sequence where he, a knight made entirely out of stained glass, pops out of a window and starts fighting young Sherlock Holmes. They made that character. You know, that was the first time anything like that had been done. So for Disney to look at that and go like, we need you to come back and mix this with traditional hand-drawn animation as well.
Yep.
Was a huge thing. And of course, because Lasseter had been working, you know, with Disney, in their animation studio, he knew what 2D traditional hand-drawn animation needed. And so they created this CAPS system to help put together paint
movies faster, pretty much.
You know, yeah, and you can see when you're watching them demo the early CAPS system, you can see the beginnings of Flash animation and stuff like that. I mean, you can see the building blocks there in this early system, which I love. It took away a lot of the extensive process of inking, and at that time they even talk about it in the movie, but you know, it's a thing that if you know anything about the way animation was done at Disney for the first few decades, they mix their own paints. You know, they come up with their own special blends and stuff like that, and it was incredibly time consuming and very fiddly work, and the wrong mix could ruin an entire, you know, batch, and, you know, several cells would have to be repainted and stuff like that. So this was the beginning of what we think about now when we think about, you pull out your Wacom tablet and you draw on it and, you shove it into Flash and it becomes animation. It's like it was so cool for me as an animation nerd to watch the first, and here's what the CAPS system looked like. Because you hear a lot about it if you're an animation nerd, but seeing the archival footage of, animators kind of looking at this thing for the first time and what all these old computer banks, because it took so much processing power to render these things, and you just see rooms and rooms of just multiple computers chain linked together, and just fascinating.
Yeah, the first movie they decided to use this cap system on is The Rescuers Down Under. And they even say in the documentary, maybe we should have used a short first before our full-length movie.
Yeah, but the thing is that they even, play some of that animation in the film to show how the system was used, and that animation is still gorgeous.
Yeah.
But you can also see they show the flight sequence through there where the eagle is soaring through the mountains and the clouds and stuff like that as one of the things the CAP system was working on. And the first thing that came to my mind is this is the opening to Beauty and the Beast.
Yeah.
When they go through all of the foliage and over the mountains and stuff like that, that is the opening. It's the same process. And you can see where that system made it smoother and easier and really crisp and beautiful. That was probably, that and the Howard Ashman footage were just highlights of the documentary to me, because they showed these little bits that you're like, wow, man, that would have been cool to see, the first steps of this technology that is indispensable now. I mean, and we've moved beyond it, of course, but still.
Yeah. And, we get to The Rescuers Down Under, it underperforms, and they kind of pull the plug on it. Sad. It's because it's still a beautiful movie.
Yeah.
But, just... that's how they were at the studios. It's not performing where we want it to be. We're going to pull the plug on it, and we'll move on to the next thing. And yeah, is what it is. So, they're disappointed. Everyone's disappointed, but you can't dwell on it. You got to pick yourself up and move on to the next thing. And the next thing would be Beauty and the Beast, which, like you were saying before, that CAP system did wonders for this movie, and the integration of CG. And it's not perfect. It's not. We were talking about that in our Beauty and the Beast episode. It's not perfect. It doesn't exactly track as well because it's still early in that animation, but the movie still looks beautiful. And and the Beauty and the Beast is this runaway hit that no one ever saw coming. That really reintegrated the animation studio. And we talked about it earlier that the animation team had been moved off site. They were no longer on the Disney lot. They were in a warehouse dozens of miles off the lot.
Yeah, in a not great part of the greater LA area.
No.
That's still, I don't know what it's like today as much, but yeah, when they moved them there, that was not the best neighborhood. They talk about there being broken glass bottles all in their parking lot. Everything's surrounded by barbed wire at the top of a chain link fence, and
But again, it all changes with Beauty and the Beast, and they are so they have so much faith in Beauty and the Beast that they show the unfinished version of this movie at the New York Film Festival in 1991. And so, according to what people say, that people were just all emotional into this movie. They're cheering this movie. And this is an unfinished, uncolorized, pencil animated version of the movie.
Yeah, this is basically the storyboards with sound for part of this, including the ending. You know, the Beast's transformation in the end is still just pencil sketches for, you know, storyboards, basically. It's like the original rough animatic.
And it's still, the people in that theater were still cheering this movie, even if it's unfinished, even if it's black and white, even if it's pencil.
And remember, this is one of the largest film festivals in the nation. This isn't just like, you know, they brought in some random people. They did do random audience screenings for kids. They talk about that. Mm-hmm. But, you know, these were like film professionals and diehard film fans.
That's like bringing these movies like to Cannes or something, you know?
Yeah. And especially, like, you don't do that for an unfinished animated movie from a studio that's like barely back on its feet again, you know? But people gave it a standing ovation at the end, which is almost unheard of for any movie at that festival.
At that time, yeah.
But the you know, of course, the sad part of that story is that they go to Howard Ashman, who is very, very sick and very near death. He's basically at hospice care at this point. And they, I forget who said that he bent over and whispered in Ashman's ear, but they said that he bent over and he said to Ashman, like, they absolutely loved it. They stood and applauded it. Who could have guessed? And Ashman, who barely could speak at this point, whispered back, I would have known. And that was the last time most of them saw Howard Ashman, it seems. But like I said, if there's a successor to Walt Disney, that line proves it. Like, that was his absolute confidence in that. I could have told you could have shown the rough animatic from this at a film festival, and they would have stood and applauded. Like,
that's how much he believed in that movie.
Yeah,
and then it gets nominated for the Academy Award, Best Picture. The first
which was absolutely, like, you know, we talked about it before. Like, that doesn't happen to an animated movie.
And they made sure it wouldn't happen again with
animated features. And then the Academy created its own little category to make sure that it could never happen again.
Which always makes me wonder, why even nominate? You're the Academy. You choose what movies get nominated. Why nominate it to begin with? Whatever. Yeah. Anyway, so Beauty and the Beast, it doesn't win Best Picture, but it doesn't win, but they got to the dance. You know, that's how they describe it in the movie. But
and the music won.
Yeah, the music did win.
Yeah. And I think it won some of the, like, special effects awards for different things, and it did win some awards. So I don't want to say that it didn't, but it didn't win the big prize.
Yeah.
But it did win the big prize at the Golden Globes, which was in itself a massive kind of win there for them. But, you know, then they...
Then the Golden Globes also does the Best Animated Feature Award.
Yeah, it's Beauty and the Beast kind of wrecked the system in a way, and they wanted to make sure that animated movies stayed in their lane after that. And I kind of wish they wouldn't. I think animation the best of animation can absolutely stand up against the best of live action, which I think is what they were afraid of. But so they mention in the documentary that something happens at this point that puts a bit of a larger wedge between Eisner and Katzenberg. Eisner was already annoyed, upset, not pleased with Katzenberg because he thought Katzenberg was taking too much credit for what was arguably Katzenberg's work. We mentioned before about people want a face of the company, and the face used to be Walt Disney.
And at this point, it was Michael Eisner.
Yeah, and for a while there was no face of the company. There were people who, and Roy did some things because he was still the named Disney, in charge and whatever. But Eisner had tried to step into Walt's shoes on that. He would host, the Sunday night movie. He was on TV all the time. I mean, when we were kids, Michael Eisner was on like every other entertainment show.
That phrase, "Hello, I'm Michael Eisner," burn into your head.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I knew Michael Eisner's face better than I knew some of my teachers. Like, the man was always on TV. He was the public face of Disney. And Katzenberg was kind of rivaling that because as the animation studio moved up, people started hearing about this guy who was revitalizing the animation at Disney. Little Mermaid and then Beauty and the Beast, you can see Katzenberg, in the awards show audiences and in the thing. But so Eisner was annoyed, and after
So was Roy too.
And Roy, I'm not really sure why. This was another thing that confused me, that maybe the documentary left out things that I would need to understand, but I'm not saying by any means that Katzenberg solely was responsible for any of this, but Katzenberg put in some work. I mean, everybody seems to agree, and of course history has shown after he left Disney and went on to do DreamWorks Animation and make that the big player and stuff, he knows what he's doing. Whatever it is he's doing, he knows his business, okay? So why are you mad at him? Because it didn't seem like he was taking sole credit from the clips they showed, but
I think
he was taking some credit, which seemed to annoy them, and I'm wondering why.
Maybe it was just that Katzenberg was trying to make himself the face of Disney Animation. It was like, no. So, Roy wanted to be the face of Disney Animation. No, Eisner wanted to be the face of all Disney, and I think it was just a play between those three who each of them wanted to be the face, and they didn't want the other two to have that kind of credit.
Yeah, I absolutely believe that Eisner is the sort that would be like, no, me first. I get all the press. I get all the glory. Eisner strikes me absolutely as that sort of guy. I know a little bit less about Roy, but
maybe because Roy had the Disney name, and honestly, Roy looks a lot like Walt.
He does, yeah. I mean, there's a strong family resemblance in the entire Disney family, resemblance there. But, so yeah. But basically, they thought Katzenberg was becoming a little too famous and a little too out there.
Bridges, yeah.
Eisner and Roy Disney decided to spring an announcement at the Beauty and the Beast company preview, like not like the premiere, but like the internal animation. Here's what your final project looks like. That they were going to build them a new animation building on the lot again. That
building is still there too.
Yeah. And Katzenberg was, again, completely floored by this. The more I watched this documentary, the more I was like, I got my problems with Jeffrey Katzenberg, but, like, boy, did they do him dirty.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, from the moment he stepped on, it was like, here's an animation department, have fun with that sinking ship. Here's, what was the other thing we talked about that they floored him with? Oh yeah, you're going to release a movie a year now. Have fun with that. And now it's like, oh, by the way, we're going to relocate your entire department. Have fun with that. granted, they needed a new building. Where they were, we just talked about, was
too small, really.
Yeah,
and
it was just
especially
awful.
especially with working on a new film every year. You needed more space. You need more people. Granted, they did now have the studio in Florida, and they had a studio in Paris, but the main studio was still going to be in California, and they needed a bigger building for that.
Yeah, so I mean, building the new building is not my issue with this. It's that, like, you're just kind of dumping random things on Katzenberg, and I'm like, was it really, like, what did this guy do to you? You know, like, did he spit in Eisner's coffee back at the Paramount or something? Like,
He sneezed in front of Eisner, and he thought he was going to get sick from it.
Yeah, I don't know what, but this seems to have been a beef that, like, predated them ever coming to Disney. Anyway, so Katzenberg was upset by that. And then they started, they were working on and finishing production on The Lion King. And as we mentioned in our Lion King episode, this was the B Squad. Nobody wanted to be on this because they had thrown all of their eggs in the basket of Pocahontas. They put all of the major talent on there, and as they say in the documentary, nobody wanted to work on Lion King. Nobody.
Yeah.
Like, nobody wanted that assignment. They also show what I think is the reason why everybody should have wanted to work on this assignment, which was the animal reference school that they put the animators through, because they brought actual freaking lions into a room with a bunch of animators and Katzenberg. And
keep in mind at this point himself, Burton is now back with the team doing Nightmare.
Yeah.
Pixar picked their movie for Toy Story, so those two are also getting made at the same time as they're doing Lion King.
Yeah, so you've got 4 different movies being made at the same time.
Aladdin, Nightmare, Lion King, Toy Story, yeah.
Yeah,
and Pocahontas, yeah.
Yeah, so maybe even 5. I think Aladdin was done by this point,
yeah.
But
so Nightmare, Lion King, Toy Story, Pocahontas.
Yeah, so, you know, you've got the brand new shiny computer tech. That's prestigious. You've got Pocahontas, which they're sure is going to be the next big hit, and they're putting all of their money and time into. You know, you've got Tim Burton's back, and he's doing really neat things with stop motion and, you know, everything. Let's go work on that. And then you've got, like, you get the Cat movie. You know, but the interesting thing is that they actually talk about the fact that because of the complete lack of confidence anybody had in this project higher up, the team was kind of left to their own devices to kind of make it what they wanted. And so they started talking about that they made it about themselves. So all that thing about, like, you know, alpha male lions fighting over the throne and everything starts to take an interesting vision on when you start thinking of what was going on between Roy and Eisner and Katzenberg at the time, and the absolute havoc that it was wreaking on some of the animators, because they talk about the bad times. Yeah. This was both the best and the worst time to be working at Disney Animation.
Poor Katzenberg. They show footage of Katzenberg almost getting mauled by a lion on stage.
That was actually kind of cool. Like, can you imagine the absolute legend Katzenberg would be now if it was like, this is the man who started the Disney Renaissance and got mauled by a lion.
On stage in front of
animators who sketched it furiously as he was bleeding out. Here is that animatic now. Like, that would have been absolutely legendary. But then again, I'm talking as somebody who is absolutely going to die from trying to pet the wrong thing. So maybe it's because that's...
You've been trying to hug the lion and pet it and pet it and call it George, and then it's just going to maul you.
The funniest scene in this sequence, and like I said, it's all documentary footage, is they have a room full of animators, and they have lions on leashes and several trained handlers there. And they are lions that have been bred in captivity, so they're not quite as wild as, wild lions, but still, it's a freaking lion. And they have this caution tape line that animators are not supposed to cross.
And who's sitting on that line?
And who is sitting there dangling his feet over this line other than Katzenberg, who's just basically daring a lion to come eat his feet? He's like
sitting in a kid in kindergarten class.
It is absolutely the funniest image. I loved it because you hear the way they've edited it together. You hear the guy bring out this huge male lion. And it's absolutely the largest one you've seen all day. And the handler is going, this is when that caution tape is absolutely paramount to, you must be behind that caution tape. And Katzenberg's just like dangling bits of himself in front of the lion. So yeah, legendary, I gotta say. But, yeah, but they were just kind of allowed to do what they want, and I think that that's one of the reasons why The Lion King ended up being such a smash hit, is because it was the least pressure environment probably on the Disney lot at the time.
Yeah.
Because nobody expected anything from it. It was the filler movie. And everybody else was talking about how they were having carpal tunnel syndrome from sketching all day, how they weren't able to grasp coffee cups without shaking violently, how many of them actually put off or completely refrained from having children because they could never find the time to plan a family because they were always how many of them missed their children's childhoods because they were at work. That it was.
And that became a thing in the film as well, as we actually see this come to a head, where Katzenberg sits everyone down and says, "Hit me with your grievances," and he actually throws, and they all throw their grievances at him, and it's like for the first time, Katzenberg kind of understands where they're coming from.
Yeah, they said Katzenberg actually cried at that meeting listening to them talk because he did not realize how bad it was. Now, my beef with Katzenberg comes in the next line when they say, it didn't stop.
Yeah.
He sat and he cried through this meeting and he heard them talk about how their lives were kind of systematically being ruined, although they loved the job and they wanted to stay. Everybody wanted to be part of this team, but it was absolutely denying them their own lives. And Katzenberg heard this and cried and commiserated with them and then went back to doing the exact same thing the next day.
Because they have a schedule to keep, and it's cruel, but it's true. They had a schedule.
A movie a year,
A movie a year.
He could have hired more staff. I'm going to say, like, if you're overworking your staff and you're a company as big as Disney, who was kind of rolling in the dough again by this point, hire more people. That's your thing. Hire more people. If your staff is overworked, hire more people. If you can't do that, you do not deserve to have a company. You are a failing company at that point if you can't afford to hire more people. Anyway, sorry.
And this is also where we start to get a little bit of a downfall as Frank Wells dies in a helicopter accident. And we haven't talked much about Frank Wells because there wasn't much to talk about, because he really wasn't no one really, like we said, no one really had anything bad to say about him. He just kind of kept to himself, and he was just there. At least the way the documentary said, he did his job, but he didn't make it about himself.
But here's the thing, is that it becomes very quickly apparent as soon as he dies. And this is the way it is a lot of times. Is that a lot of times when you have strong personalities vying for,
attention.
Dominance, I think would be the word I would use, okay? If that is going to run smoothly, there has to be a peacemaker.
And that was Frank Wells.
And that was Frank Wells' job that nobody, I think, really realized that he was doing. And the second he's gone, it all just collapses because he's not there to grease the wheels anymore. He's not there to be the kindly in-between guy that smooths all the ruffled feathers.
Hey, Jeff, talk to me and I'll talk to Mike and we'll get this sorted out.
Yeah, that guy. He was that kind of fixer, it seems, because the second he's gone, everything starts to fall apart, it seems. Katzenberg, because of The Lion King, was becoming more and more well-known. Mm-hmm. By the time The Lion King is gearing up for release, Katzenberg has completely gone full in on, I am the face of this film. I am going to go with, lion cubs and full-grown lions who are about to eat my head and pose for pictures and, talk to all the press and everything, which, of course, Eisner was already annoyed with him for doing. Yeah. And he just cranked it up to 11 at this point, it seems.
While also trying to go for Wells' job.
Yeah, as soon as Wells was gone, he wanted Wells' job. And
he wasn't even buried yet.
Yeah, and that is exactly what they made it seem like. Before they were even able to hold the service, Katzenberg was already in there saying, I mean, at least this is what other people at the company say. I'm not sure I've ever heard Katzenberg talk about
This is a story as it's explained in the documentary, but then it could be skewed.
Yeah, but according to Eisner and Roy Disney, Katzenberg was already coming to them and being like, so I get the job now, right? And they were not even done planning the funeral service. I don't know how true that is. Like I said, I've got my problems with Eisner. I would not put it past him to make some of this up. But Eisner does say in the documentary that Katzenberg's problem was that he wasn't patient enough. Eisner makes it sound like they were going to give Katzenberg the job, but they wanted to wait a little bit in honor of Frank Wells. That they didn't want to overshadow the news of his death and the morning of his death by saying, oh, and now the new guy is Katzenberg, because they thought Katzenberg would showboat it, I think, a little bit.
Yeah.
And Eisner, who gives a voiceover interview, I don't know if it was recorded specifically for the documentary or what.
It might be a radio interview.
It might be, I don't know, but there is audio of Michael Eisner talking, and he says that Katzenberg would have gotten that job, but he was so pushy that they felt that maybe he wasn't the right person after all. That if he wouldn't give Frank Wells his due, stand back, let that mourning period happen, that maybe he didn't have the right, mindset or whatever. I'm not even sure what the right word would be, but the tact maybe to fill that position that Frank Wells had filled for so many years. And Katzenberg responded to this snubbing the way you would probably expect by this point.
He quits.
Yep, he takes his ball and he goes to Steven Spielberg's house, and they call up David Geffen, and they create a little company called DreamWorks.
Hey, they've been telling me they're making a bug movie. Let's make that bug movie first.
Yeah. Which is exactly how that happened, I am convinced. But yeah, the documentary kind of ends there. Yeah. As we talked about, of course, the Disney Renaissance didn't stop with The Lion King. But after The Lion King was also a smash hit, that's when people decided that Disney could do no wrong. Disney suddenly had the golden touch in animation again. Every Disney movie at that point was an event. Mm-hmm. You had to go see it. you wanted to be there on opening weekend because, even without the internet and stuff, especially if you're a little kid, you didn't want some jerk kid on the playground telling you about the movie before you got to see it. You wanted to be the jerk kid on the playground ruining the movie for other kids.
Yeah.
That was your one revenge against the bully, is like, by the way, Simba's dad dies. Like, you wanted to be that kid. At least I did. I am a vindictive little thing. But yeah, so I mean, but by the end of the period, this like 1994 when Katzenberg is resigning and leaving, that was the rise of the Disney Renaissance. By the time Katzenberg leaves, it is absolutely the Disney Renaissance, which I do believe is another Katzenberg coined term.
Yes, there's an interview in the documentary that he says that the Little Mermaid will begin a new renaissance for Disney animation.
Yeah, and he was correct. I mean, history has proven him absolutely correct on that.
Yeah.
I think that overall in this build-up, the things that they did right were that they got back to Walt's idea of looking toward the future.
Mm-hmm.
Are there new technologies? Are there new techniques? What are the kids talking about these days? That kind of thing.
We kind of skipped over, but there's a phrase that Roy says in this movie that I actually do like. It's like, you're letting this dead guy run your company. And if you keep letting the dead guy run your company, you're not going to have a company anymore. And stepping away from the what Walt wanted mentality also definitely was a factor in the Disney Renaissance.
Yeah, and like I said, ironically, the stepping away from what Walt would have done idea, which I don't think was a legitimate idea. I think that was somebody else's idea of Walt. I do not think it's legitimately what Walt would have done. A lot of those choices.
Idealized version of Walt, or what they idealized Walt to be.
Yeah, what they idealized Walt to be, and also this static image of Walt. Walt was always moving and always trying new things and, always looking for something different. He never just kind of sat down on his, rested on his laurels or whatever.
And Roy even says, if you keep on doing this, what you have is a museum. You're not going to have anything, no innovation.
Yeah. And they were right, and I think that was the first big thing they did correct, was they kind of got some new blood in who was willing to say, all right, that's the way they did it, now let's find out how to do it. We didn't really talk about this, but when Schneider came in, Katzenberg and Schneider kind of created a environment in the animation department of you can criticize anything in the department.
Mm-hmm.
And he starts talking about little things like, why are we still using this type of pen? Why are we using the, does the paper have to be exactly this? Does the, do our meetings have to be at this exact time in the morning? And so the idea of them being able to just throw out any idea they had, nothing was above criticism, they said, except the marketing department. But as far as maybe we shouldn't run the studio this way, maybe the, higher ups need to listen to us more, maybe we need to do this differently and that differently, anything, maybe we need a new brand of coffee, they were able to just kind of throw that out there. And I think that helped shake things up, and I think that they might have changed things, small things maybe, and some big things for the better because of that. And then the other thing I think that they did really well is that they had that gong show process. And I know that was kind of out of desperation, but I think getting new people in to just pitch them anything.
Yeah.
You know, you don't have to make everything. Not everything's going to work, of course, duh. But you need to be hearing more than just your one little tiny group that always gives you ideas. Sometimes you might need to grab the janitor and say, hey, what about you? What would you like to see in an animated movie? And I think more companies should do that. I think they should just have a, like, pitch lottery or something at some of these places. Just like, I don't care who you are, put your name in the hat, we'll draw a few, you can come in and pitch a thing. Because I really do think that is new blood that is needed a little more often than it is. So I think that those three things were probably the most instrumental things in waking Sleeping Beauty again. I mean, at least from what I got out of that documentary. And I don't know about you, but I think we've talked about it before, which is that after Katzenberg left,
they were really pretty much directionless almost.
Yeah, the Disney Renaissance begins to falter about halfway through.
Still makes money, and a lot of them are still classics, but you can see that that direction isn't there anymore. That figurehead, that leadership, it's kind of starting to stumble.
Yeah, there was a very clear idea, I think, in what we are going to be doing. You know, this is what Disney Animation is. I think there was a very clear vision starting with Little Mermaid and Beauty and the Beast. And I think it goes through, definitely through Lion King, of course, but I think you can even still see it a little bit in Pocahontas, but I do believe Katzenberg left in the middle of Pocahontas being produced. Mm-hmm. So I think that the new people kind of came in and wanted to change things a little bit. I think that may have been. I don't know. A fully Katzenberg-led Pocahontas, maybe that would have been the hit that they expected.
Imagine maybe we wouldn't have had what Hunchback it had, though.
Yeah, and maybe, I don't know. Yeah, maybe, I don't know if Katzenberg would have said, like, this is too goofy. Maybe he would have, maybe he wouldn't have.
No.
Because that was kind of our big problem with both of those. You know, but I think that especially after Hunchback, which I still think was just criminally underrated at the time.
Yeah.
I mean, you want to take a time machine back and bonk some people on the head. Go bonk some critics on the head at that time and be like, you don't understand. This is a masterpiece, except for the gargoyles. And I think that the successors, because there wasn't really just one, I feel, throughout the rest of the Renaissance. It kind of got split up a little bit, the vision part, I think. I think that really sort of fell apart after Hunchback. I think that nobody quite knew what they were doing, and they all wanted to do a few different things. But here is the worst part, I think. They decided that Disney is only for kids again.
Yeah. Meanwhile, you have competition. You have Pixar. Yes, they're working with Disney, but they're still technically at the time they were still a separate studio. They were competition, and they were doing Toy Story, which yes, kids movie, but there is some stuff that everyone can see in that, even in movies like A Bug's Life.
And then DreamWorks
kicks up. They do, very much, doing, they have Ants, Look at Prince of Egypt and El Dorado.
Yeah, and I mean, Ants, are you kidding me? It is a Woody Allen film in animation. That's not for kids.
Yeah.
I mean, Katzenberg kind of takes this entertainment for everybody that you can also bring the kids to. Because remember how much we absolutely loved the magic in the first half of the Renaissance.
Yeah.
And we said, even as adults, this stuff still stands up. And then you start moving into the later part of the Renaissance, and it's like, Hercules wasn't even funny to me when I was a teenager, much less as an adult in my 30s. Some of the a lot of the stuff in Mulan was like, why is this even here? And I think that one of the things that Katzenberg's leadership may not get enough credit for is that, yes, the first half of the Disney Renaissance was, family movies, but they were family movies.
Yeah.
They weren't little kid movies. And when he moves over to DreamWorks, Shrek is a family movie. Shrek is super funny as an adult because we saw that as adults.
Yeah.
We were already adults by the time Shrek came out. We were, a lot of the stuff in Ants, not a great movie, but still, that's adult humor. That's not, and not vulgar adult humor, but that's, flying over the heads of the kids humor. And some of the other ones as well, Prince of Egypt.
Yeah.
There's a lot there for adults, and then kids are there too and get entertainment out of it. But it's a full family movie. And then eventually, the back half of the Renaissance just starts being like, we make movies for little kids. And that, I think, is probably the biggest failing of the back half and why there's not as much of the magic there.
And especially when going into that post-Renaissance era, where a lot of it is they are still trying to do some innovation like they did with Dinosaur, but once you get to you get to movies like Growing Up. I mean, I always use it as my go-to, which is Home on the Range.
Yeah.
That
is very much a little kids movie.
Yeah.
That is super little kids movie. And it doesn't feel like a Disney movie.
It really doesn't. It feels like
I think if you asked the random person on the street who made the movie Home on the Range, one, if they remembered it at all, but two, I doubt many of them would say that's a Disney film.
Honestly, if I didn't know it was a Disney film, it feels like a late era Don Bluth film.
It does kind of. I could maybe see one of the Warner Brothers offshoots doing that as well, but it does not at all feel like a Disney film. So yeah, I think that they start getting a little. The irony is that the music starts being more adult in the back half, but the movies they're attached to are far more kiddie films. Mm-hmm. You start getting Phil Collins in for Tarzan, and what 8-year-old knows who Phil Collins is?
Yep.
But they're targeting Tarzan for an 8-year-old audience, 8 to 10 years old. And it's like, none of those kids give the slightest flip who Phil Collins is. And his style of music were not where the kids were at. The interesting thing about the front half of the Disney Renaissance and the Broadway influence that Ashman and Menken brought in, and then, Tim Rice and Menken and Schwartz and Menken, is that Broadway is kind of an all generations musical style. Mm-hmm. You can have Broadway musicals for little kids, and you can have Broadway musicals for adults, and for some reason, that style of music seems to move most people equally. But I'm not sure that adult alternative Phil Collins moves everybody equally. I'm not even sure as much as I love The Lion King, I don't know. Elton John was still a weird choice for me. I don't know. Now that I know we could have had an ABBA version of Lion King, I can't get that out of my head. Like, are you kidding me? That would have been epic. But even, later on, it's like, unless you're brought up in, like, heavily in church, you got 10-year-olds out there singing, like, old school gospel from Hercules.
Yeah.
Or doo-wop in Meg's song, I mean, these are not really broad musical styles at this point that they're relying on. So it almost seems like they wanted the music to appeal to the adults and the movie
story,
and which does not fit at all, because I mean, I know adults, I am adults, that would walk around singing Disney songs even now. I'll walk around singing stuff from Frozen 2. Absolutely I will. But that's because it's kind of a universal sound again.
And they wouldn't find that sound again until Princess and the Frog.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they really went away from it for a long time. And I heard today, my father, the Oscars were on Sunday night. We're recording this on a Tuesday. So they were like 2 days ago. And my father was listening today to a playlist of Oscar-winning songs from, for that. And I walked into the room and he was listening to the one from Monsters, Inc., I think it was.
If I Didn't Have You?
Yeah, and I was like, it just doesn't click with me. And the thing is I like Toy Story, but the
Randy Newman.
the
Randy Newman
style, and we're huge fans of Paul and Storm, who have a long-standing Randy Newman joke about every Randy Newman song sounds the same. And the interesting thing is that was not the case until Toy Story.
Yeah.
After Toy Story, Randy Newman sounds like a one-note joke. Before Toy Story, he doesn't. Look at Randy Newman's early catalog. I love, Short People Got No Reason to Live. I Think It's Gonna Rain Today is one of my favorites. Bette Midler slays that song. His songs were varied and interesting and not quite the same style any given time. And then for some reason he comes in to work with Disney and now everything sounds like that Family Guy joke.
Yeah.
Red-headed lady reaching for an apple, gonna take a bite, no, she's gonna breathe on it first. It's like it's all that same kind of thing, which is what leads to the Family Guy jokes and the Paul and Storm jokes and stuff. And I don't know what happened to him, but I kind of blame post-Renaissance Disney.
Yeah.
You ruined Randy Newman, Disney. What happened?
Congratulations, Disney. You ruined Randy Newman.
And Phil Collins.
Yeah.
I'm not letting that go. I will take that to my grave. But yeah. So yeah, that something happens in the back half, and I'm not sure it's entirely what happened with the management shakeup and Katzenberg leaving and bad blood left over, but it is really suspicious timing.
Yeah.
So, Renaissance overall. Let's wrap this thing up and put a bow on it. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts?
The Renaissance definitely brought Disney back to prominence. Like you have, and Disney as a whole always goes through these low and highs. You have the golden era with Snow White, and that was the big high. And then you have the wartime movies, and that was a big low with the package films. Then you get, the Silver Age with Cinderella and Lady and the Tramp and Peter Pan, and that's another big high. And then you get the post-Walt era with the Fox and the Hound, and there are classics some of us could be still on TV like Robin Hood, but that's still low because those movies did not make a lot of money when they came out. And then once you get to the Renaissance again, you get the big high again. And then afterwards, you get the low. And now we're in this new revival era, and once again, everything's high again.
Yeah.
So to have that high in that era where, with us, that was a great time, for us at least, because we got to see that growth of something special within Disney. Characters that, to this day, are well-loved. And those movies that you can go back to, still watch them and still have that same feeling. Like you said you're still standing up when Ariel is on the rock singing her song. You're still have tears in your eyes when Beast is about to die at the end of Beauty and the Beast. You still want, Aladdin to get Jasmine and become a prince. You still want, Simba to have his place in the circle of life. Those are feelings that no matter how many times you see those movies, no matter how many times you know that movie back and forth, every line, you can recite the entire movie in your sleep, you can still go back to those movies, enjoy those movies. So those are, to me, that's a good thing. That's a good. I love that era of Disney. That's us. That's our formative years. We grew up with those films, and I wouldn't trade that. I'm trying to find the right words here and flubbing here, but it's like, I love that. I love that era of movies.
It was lightning in a bottle.
It really is. It really was.
And I don't think that we will ever have another Disney Renaissance. We will have the highs and the lows. But I'm not sure.
Some people have called this era the second Renaissance.
But I don't really think that's an earned title. Because here's the thing is Disney wasn't dead. I mean, Disney was basically dead. When you're getting beat by Care Bears, you're dead. And that's not a harsh on the Care Bears. I had Care Bears as a kid. That was part of my childhood. I'm not knocking it. But if you were to ask the random person, which do you think is going to win, a Disney movie or Care Bears? That's not a fight anybody today would think that Care Bears ever won. So at the time, it's a joke. Like, can you imagine? Because we were a little too young to really comprehend.
The 90-minute commercial for stuffed animals.
Yeah.
Beat out Disney.
But I mean, we were a little too young to understand like Hollywood as a industry.
Yeah.
Can you imagine anybody in Hollywood today going like, Disney Animation, why would I want to work there?
Yeah.
No, nobody is going to say that. Disney is still like, you might not want to work there for other reasons, but it's not because they're not good at their jobs. It's not because they're a joke. And the thing is I think Disney has, and this started in the Renaissance too, the conglomeration of the mouse eating everything. I think Disney is so big now that even though we accept there will be lows and there will be highs, I'm not sure that anyone will ever look at Disney as not a force again. Like, not a benchmark of some sort. And to have been a kid of the appropriate audience age at the time when Disney went from a joke to the king of everything was, you can't use any other word. It was absolutely magical.
Yeah.
To experience that firsthand. And I don't think that that's an experience that will ever be repeated in the same way. Because I don't know if it's possible for Disney to fall that low again.
Even if the Walt Disney Animation Studios, if every movie they have is a bomb, they now fall back under Pixar. and they can fall back onto Lucasfilm, and they can fall back onto Marvel.
But let me ask you this. When was the last time that a Disney animated film did not make a profit? Some of the movies we talked about in the pre-Renaissance were like legitimate bombs. They lost money for the studio. When's the last time Disney actually lost, made less than production cost on an animated film?
I can't even say. I mean...
Yeah, exactly. It's been like 10 years at least.
The closest I couldn't even say to most recent would be Good Dinosaur, but that still made money.
Yeah. I mean, I cannot remember the last time Disney did not make profit off an animated film. Mm-hmm. So, what is even comparable these days? Nothing, because even Disney's quote-unquote bombs now are still making more money than most studios.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure that it is possible in the current climate. I mean, I think the world would have to change quite drastically for there to ever be a repeat of this.
Yeah.
So, Disney Renaissance is absolutely... possibly the defining moment of our childhoods.
Pretty much. And
culturally
really,
speaking.
It's even the defining moment of the company, if you want to go in that direction.
Yeah, because other than Mickey Mouse, like, who do people want to see? Like, yeah, you might want to see Cinderella, you might want to see Sleeping Beauty, but most kids are going to want to see Ariel or Belle. Or, that's what they're going to be there for. So, yeah, and honestly, I'm not even sure how many kids today really know classic as in Walt era Disney. I think when they think of classic Disney, they think of Disney Renaissance.
Yeah. And I think that's all we can really say on the subject of Disney Renaissance. So, this is it. We're putting the Disney Renaissance away. We've seen all the major movies. We'll get to the Rescuers Down Under eventually. Don't worry. Sorry for skipping it, those of you who are Rescuers fans, but we'll go back to it.
Yeah.
But now that we've done essentially the beginning of our love of Disney, the beginning of us as people, our formative years, I think it's time to go back to the very beginning of all of this, the beginning of the magic, as it were, because there's a phrase that it all started with a mouse. And I think it's time to go back and see the origins of this mouse and what that mouse became today. So next week on the show, we are going to be looking at 4 classic Mickey Mouse shorts, and we're going to be looking at 4 modern Mickey Mouse shorts to see the evolution of Mickey in that original era and what the mouse is today. When you say Mickey Mouse, what does the young people of today, what do they see? And what did we see when we were growing up watching the old stuff? And no, we're not going to be going to Mickey Mouse's Clubhouse. We're not going to that. We're going to be looking at the modern Disney Mickey Mouse shorts, the Mickey Mouse short series that you can see on YouTube. But we're going to go there. We're going to go with the classic stuff. So, do you want to reveal which ones we're going to use, or do you want to keep that under wraps?
Well, I will say that we are going to start our review where it all started, right back at the beginning with Steamboat Willie.
1928, where it all began. Mickey looks good for a guy over 90.
Yeah. Get your whistlers ready.
So we're going to go back next week, Steamboat Willie, and the classic Mickey shorts, and the modern Mickey shorts. Hope you guys come back for that. And stick around for that. Stick around for other stuff that we've got planned on later on. And
We didn't tell the one big news. If you've been listening, we have been running our sponsor MarsCon over a few episodes now, and we will officially both be at MarsCon.
Yay!
And you may be getting a special episode or two from MarsCon.
If we can find the time, we've had some tentative people that might be on the show. We have some tentative. If everything goes to plan, and if you've ever been to a convention, whether it's science fiction or comic books or anime or whatever, timing isn't going to be the best. But we're gonna try. We're gonna try to record at least one show at MarsCon with at least one guest. That's the most that we can say, that we're gonna try.
And if nothing else, we will record an episode at MarsCon with your dear co-hosts, just ourselves.
We'll be in the hallway yelling, and while people are passing on, saying, "What are these two crazy people doing in the hallway?" We're talking Disney.
All right. Well, join us next week for Mickey. Thanks for sticking with us. Bye.
Thank you for listening to Rewatching the Magic. We invite you to keep the magic going by joining the conversation online. Find us on Facebook at Rewatching the Magic, on Twitter at Rewatch the Magic, and of course, find all new episodes at rewatchingthemagic.podbean.com. Until next time, remember, the magic is for everyone. It only stops if you let it.